You don't have no leftover beans?
Say what?
And you had the beans.
Yes. What event?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Newark Municipal Council's pre-meeting. Madam President, we don't have any interviews.
No, 7R8A, 7R8B.
Every appointment.
No, we never do those. That's theirs. We don't have any appointments, Madam President, so let's go right to the agenda. Thank you. Are there any questions of the reports of the board? Well, let's start with the, as you can see, we have 22 speakers for the hearing of citizens. Are there any questions on the reports from the boards and commissions?
None.
None, there being none, ordinances on first reading. 6FA is the amusement, the festivals ordinance.
Comments? Is the Corp Council here? Any comments or questions? We're deferring this. Next item, Mr. Clerk.
Is that the council's?
Yeah, Madam President.
Yes, Councilman.
Yeah, I apologize. I wasn't here at the last meeting. Was there a reason why it was deferred?
There
Incorporate
Wait,
the changes.
Okay.
was a meeting, and we were waiting for a revised version of the legislation.
Understood. Thank you.
Has it been revised? Do you have the revised version?
No, that's why we're deferring, because I don't have we don't have an item. We may have it by tomorrow night's meeting. On ordinance on public hearing, second reading and final passage, 6 PSNFA is the rent inspections for rental units. We have a request from the administration to defer action at this time. There are some adjustments that need to be made to this before we move it further.
yes.
6 PSNFB is the short-term rental use for the first of the 4 Airbnb. C is the short-term rental use in adding to the housing code. Is Corporation Council present? He wishes to speak to the council on C before?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Kenyatta Stewart, City of Newark Corporation Council. So I just, one of the things that we contemplated was if there was a need to add or to take out the petition aspect of it. And what that what that really means is that the people who want to do the Airbnb have to go from door to door within their community to make sure that he or she can get, I use the word permission from the rest of the community. So we wanted to make sure you all wanted that to be in the actual ordinance still.
Mr. Corp Counsel, have we had another meeting with corporate Airbnb since the last one?
So I have not. I know that they do want to meet again. They would like to meet again, of course. I know that's a big concern for them. But at the end of the day, I told them that, you know, this is Newark, and my concern is the city, not necessarily what your concerns are. However, I know they would like to meet before it's passed, but that's up to us.
I think that maybe we should do that.
Okay.
We need to resolve this, issue.
Sure.
And I keep reading about what's going on in New York and other communities.
Sure.
And so in order to be fair to the city, the residents, resolution needs to occur.
Sure. Okay. So if you want, you can defer all the Airbnb items until a meeting, schedule a meeting for perhaps Friday or Monday.
Yes. And also, because we're still in court, Judge Grant excused the plaintiff. She called the plaintiff.
Defendant. It's defendant, but we probably shouldn't talk about it here. It's a court case unrelated to the specific ordinance. It does have to do with the history of what has been going on and what the city as a whole has had as far as a concern. However, it's in municipal court. I just think we should leave it there.
And it has been rescheduled to June 6th, I believe it is.
Yeah, I think so.
So, yes.
Sure. I realized that I missed, if possible, I missed 6FA, which is in reference to the special permits. I did want to make a comment in reference to it. I'm not sure if the clerk had an opportunity to speak to you all about Councilwoman McIver's a request in reference to putting notice out, giving the people within the community notice of the different events that are going to be going on. We are going to add that to the actual document here so that that will be a requirement that the people within the community get notice of the event that's going on, recognizing that even though the folk who are getting permits to have the road closed and things of that nature, that doesn't mean that the people within the community know what's going on, and honestly doesn't mean that they know exactly when or remember when. I think that's a big deal, and I think it will probably help us with some of the confusion that we see throughout the community.
Madam President, if I may,
Yes, Councilman Gonzalez.
how do we define community?
I think we should probably do it within a 3-block radius.
Because I believe that we should probably use the same that the zoning ordinance requires 200 feet from a radius of 200 feet, I believe it is, because community could be defined in a very wide way that encompasses the whole neighborhood, the whole northward, let's say. District. Oh, yes.
There is I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. That the people who have direct impact to the different events, I think it's a case-by-case situation sometimes depending on what the event is. In this case, more so why I was requesting this was because it's like the actual residents and businesses within the block radius that don't even know what's happening sometimes. So I don't want to get into like a whole blow this out of proportion, but it should be notified to people who are being directly impacted by the event or whatever's taking place.
I did just have a small dialogue with the acting director of economic development. The other issue that we have to deal with is who's going to be responsible. I think the people who are having the event should be responsible. We may have to come up with a list for them, but they should be responsible for mailing out the information to the people. I don't think that should be the city's cost or the city's responsibility to put the people on notice for the event.
Yeah, that might be an issue.
Yeah.
That's going to be a big issue. I mean, some of these people are not going for a block party or whatever the case might be. They're not going to be going to notify people. And when a complaint come in, let's be very clear. When a complaint comes in, they ain't going to the person having the event. They calling down to the city, to the mayor's office, to the council's office about it. So I would think we could come up with some type of creative way to notify residents that wouldn't be so much of a strain on the department regarding permits. You know, if we're issuing them, we are the ones that issuing, giving authority body. So we should be able to find some creative way in the 21st century to notify to residents that there are events happening and that they're going to have block closure, non-parking, or whatever the case might be. We should be able to do that.
I'm sure we can come up with a way. Maybe we just need to consider adding the costs associated with that. I mean, granted, in this day and age, most of us, and I use the word most of us, communicate through phone, through email, and things of that nature. However, there are some people who do not, and I don't think it's fair for us to leave them out with the notice that's required. So, we have to come up with a way. We have a little time between now and June 6th to deal with that part of it.
Madam President.
Yes, Councilman Ramos.
Yeah, let me just mention that as a reminder that they do currently require signatures when they apply for a block party permit. So there is a mechanism in place. I think the Councilwoman's point a few weeks back, it's a good point that sometimes some of these events are held. As a council person, we're not necessarily aware, and if we do get some inquiries from residents, it would be a good idea for us to at least have a heads up. Melvin does send out a very comprehensive schedule, which I do look at, but maybe there's a way that at least, whether it's on a week-by-week basis, that events are extracted from Mr. Waldrop's report and maybe put on the city's website somewhere so that if people want to be aware of events happening throughout the city, that may be an easy way to at least raise awareness and have more disclosure. So, and you always get one or two neighbors who are not happy, even though a particular person may have gotten 150 signatures on their block for an event, and sometimes those calls come to us as well. So.
Mr. Clerk, just another observation. During this summer, it's my observation, during the summer, as I go from, on a Saturday, as we go, but as I go from event to event, I've discovered something. A number of block parties are impromptu, and it's decided within those people who live on that block that they have no knowledge of the process. And there's a little clue that I picked up. When you don't see the police markers at the end of the street, it's a signal that we just put this together for our neighbors and we're going to have a good time. And so it may be the police department needs to be a sign-off for these block parties. Is that taking place? And not for punitive, but just for the process. I've seen a fight where they had blocked the street, there was no notification to neighbors, and they had a fisticuff.
So I'm gonna think about it in a realistic approach. Just when I was out trying to do what I thought was right for the community, if I don't have the barricades, it's because I did not speak to whomever it is. If the requirement was that the police were supposed to sign off as they do now, I can't imagine that the person who's doing the impromptu situation is going to prepare themselves in a way to go through that process. I know the requirements to get certain things done are listed on the application and things of that nature, but I can't imagine, and again, I'm just using me, when I thought I was doing the right thing by, I'm gonna put my car in the middle of the street or what have you to get things done. I can't imagine that person is following the rules. So you're right.
Oh, yes, they'd rather do that than pay the fee. They'd rather do that than pay the fee. Any other comments about this? About 6PSFA?
I just want to thank Corporation Counsel and his team, especially Grayson, who had been working with me about this ordinance. So just thank you for that information.
Madam President.
Yes, Councilman.
Now that the Corp Council's here, I know we deferred it, but I wanted to go back to the ordinance related to the inspections of vacant apartments, and I know at some point it's going to come back. And a few meetings back, I had made the suggestion for us to add a time frame as far as when the inspections are supposed to take place. Because I could just see apartments being vacant for an extended period of time because of our inability to get these inspections done
Yes.
in a timely manner. And I don't want to punish prospective tenants and landlords because of our inefficiency. So I think we should definitely add something in the ordinance that requires the city to do their inspection within 45 days or, a reasonable amount of time.
I just want to comment, Council President, if I can. In our last meeting we had, Councilman Ramos had brought that up, which was a great suggestion, and that actually has been added to the ordinance. It was actually in there already for the 10-day. It needs to be expected within 10 days. Corporate Council can speak to it,
I'm looking for it
course.
in the ordinance. And
Yeah, it's like 13, Section 13, I think. I don't have it right in front of me. Kenyatta, I'm sorry.
Corp Counsel.
The question is regarding the time limit piece that apartment has to be inspected by code enforcement with the city. Could you point out in the ordinance where that is?
So I don't have it with me. I know it does speak to, it speaks to the fact that it has to be done within 10 days of the application. So essentially what happens is the application has to be put together by of course, the landlord.
what happens if it's not done within 10 days? Is the landlord able to rent the unit? Is there an automatic, is there a conditional approval that's issued?
Well, code enforcement has to do their part within 10 days.
But what happens if they don't?
You can't rent the unit out.
So again, it means nothing on paper if you put a requirement that an inspection must be done within 10 days, and if it's not done, there's no consequence.
No, but there's consequences.
What's the enforcement process?
Well, if you do.
I think 10 days is a very tight.
There are consequences, but the consequences are to the landlord, not
And the
to the
tenant.
city.
Yeah, it's to the
Because the
landlord.
landlord won't be able to rent the unit, so that's lost revenue. That was one of my objections at
Yes.
the beginning, and it continues to be. I believe that we cannot penalize the landlords. They say a month of rent could be $900, $1,200. In some of the apartments here is $2,200, $3,500, so that's a lot of money.
I've seen in other towns where they're given up to 30 days to do the inspection, and if at the end of 30 days that inspection is not done by the municipality, then there's some kind of conditional approval that's given, because like Councilman mentioned, and it's also a big issue for tenants. Tenants are under very tight timelines to rent apartments, and if you're asking someone to hold off because the municipality is backlogged in doing inspections, you're going to create a rental crisis in this town. And I agree with the premise of the ordinance wholeheartedly. I think inspecting apartments to ensure that health and safety standards are being met prior to renting them is important. But it's also putting a lot of pressure on a group of individuals in the city that are already, under some pretty tight constraints as far as their responsibility and time. And you're adding an enormous amount of inspections that they're going to have to undertake.
So noted.
Madam President, I'm not very good at predicting the future, but the implementation of this ordinance is going to cause a huge backlog of cases. We don't have the number of personnel to handle what we have right now, never mind about additional work. We can't. We're not going to be able to do anything with this. This looks good on paper, but from a practical standpoint, it's not going to work. And the landlords are panicking.
So noted.
They're calling us, they're calling me, they're saying, I don't know about the rest of my colleagues, but they're calling and they're saying, I'm going to lose at least 1 month, at least 1 month.
Yes.
And this is already in an environment that has one of the most restrictive rent control laws in the
In
country.
addition to the rent control laws that we have,
You have these informal assessments that are happening from the tax office, randomly throughout the city at this time. It's a lot happening at one time, and I really believe, you could potentially create an environment that hurts investment in the city because you have all these regulatory things happening at once. So if we're not, we need to be prepared to handle this responsibility. I think it's a great ordinance, but it will be a failure if we do not have the staff necessary to conduct these inspections. It'll be embarrassing for all of us.
So,
Madam President, if I
Yes,
may,
if you don't mind. Councilman
the city of
Gonzalez.
Newark is not the first that has this kind of inspection. We should inquire around. And Belleville has it, Bloomfield has it. So inquire as to, let's say, the experience that they had. Because, the size in this case matters. I believe that it's important that we have to provide for many more, not just one or two inspectors that are going to dedicate their time exclusively to that. Because come July and August, that the kids are not in school, a lot of people move out of their apartments in the summer. So you will have, as mentioned, a tremendous backlog of inspections to do, and people, the landlords, are going to be losing at least, as mentioned, 1 month of rent.
So as noted by the different council people here, the administration will consider the conditional acceptance, as you mentioned a few moments ago. We will get back to you between now and the next meeting. We do ask that you continue to move it forward, and of course, there's time to make necessary amendments.
Any other comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's been the first.
Councilman McCallum said, please hire, what did
You
you?
need to hire people first. Sure. There's no way this can work. I mean, the legislation it could be good, but I just think it's impossible that it could work. We have too many things in the city that are not happening on time now that we're working on, and to just add something like this to the mix, I just think it's impossible without hiring people first.
Oh, I just want to add, Councilman President, if possible, I just want to, one, I'm optimistic. As a leader, we have to be optimistic. And so I'm optimistic about this legislation. I hear my colleagues loud and clearly, the same complaints they have and, input, I agree. I just think we need to find some way to make it work. And we can work all together in a collaborative sense to make it happen, because we're behind the 8 ball regarding this type of piece of legislation in our city. Even though the towns around us are small, we're still the biggest attacked city because we're big, and so we're getting attacked by these things every day, and we have to find some way to make it work. So I just think we all need to work collaboratively together, because that's what we're supposed to do, to try to get it forward. But I do agree, we need more people. We need to address a lot of the concerns that were brought up, and we cannot be penalizing landlords and things of that nature, which many colleagues mentioned. But I'm optimistic to us getting it done. So I don't want to say like it cannot work, because this is something that's attacking us every day, and our offices are getting calls about this type of I'm losing my train of thought, this type of behavior that's happening out there in the city, and we're trying to put a law in place to combat against that. So I just want to thank the administration, and hopefully we could continue to work together to add more pieces to this and add more staff, like Councilwoman Crump mentioned meetings ago about, getting more code enforcement officers, because we need them, period, not just with just this ordinance. We have a backlog in general. So thank you.
Councilman McCallum.
I just want to add one more thing. Kenyatta, quite a few people come to our offices, Corp Council, a lot of people come to our offices in need of apartments, and it needs to turn around real quick, like sometimes a week or 2 weeks at the most. And I just think with this, it's just going to create problems, a backlog. I think it has to be thought out a little bit more. And I don't mind moving it forward, but at the end of the day, I think, it has to be some more tangible things put in place.
I mean, and of course, the administration is very aware of the fact that this is going to cause a number of issues and maybe some hiccups. We recognize that. We are working on doing what we have to do on our part to make sure we move things forward in the right way. But the thing that's most important to us is safety. I mean, I don't want to. I'm not going to ever balance or jeopardize the possibility of someone moving into a unit where I have, some control over someone moving into a unit that isn't up to par, and unfortunately their kids are impacted and things of that nature. So if it's out of the possibility of them getting into this unit that is not up to par, the possibility of their children being harmed or impacted or affected, or me rushing this thing through, guess what? I'm not going to let it happen. And I just think that there's no parent in this world that's going to agree with me by saying that I'm going to hold this thing back. And that's why I'm glad you all are willing to work with us to make sure we continue to press forward as we make the amendments to hopefully encourage you all to, vote this in the right way.
Could I mention one
we
last-
agree, and we agree with that premise, but also weigh that against the fact that you're going to have people with nowhere to stay for a couple of weeks, and then now you're looking at the YMCA, you're looking at another entity getting involved to try to help them out.
Councilman, I agree completely.
So that's
We speak the same
my
language.
concern.
I agree.
Councilman Gonzalez.
Yes, I totally agree with what you stated. However, the original problem that we had was people coming from New York, and let's say that the landlord had been paid for a year and not having the opportunity to inspect so I believe that we should try to segregate the two ordinances, the one requiring the certificate of continued occupancy and the one that requires the city sending the individual to conduct an inspection and make sure that that apartment is habitable. I believe that we are including too much in that ordinance that we're considering.
Well, there's two, actually both pieces of legislation are part of the same document itself because it speaks to the same exact portion of the code. I just think it doesn't make sense for me to draft something that I know would need the necessary improvements that speak to another issue that is outstanding, and to send them back to back, for lack of better words. I do recognize that, listen, we're going to consider your recommendations, and we're going to try to tighten it up so that you will all be able to consider it in a space where we're all comfortable with.
Madam President, could I just one
Yes,
last thing?
Councilman Ramos.
The other thing I want to mention, Corp Counsel, is that you have other agencies that regularly do inspections before, subsidies are granted, whether it's through Section 8 or temporary rental assistance through the County Social Service Board. And that may be a way that the city can extract, information that they look for during their inspection so that maybe you can expedite, the issuance of the certificate. Because they're probably looking at the exact same things that the city inspectors are going to be looking at, and they don't authorize TRA and Section 8 until those improvements are made. So you already have a lot of data
Sure.
that's available and hopefully can be useful. And the ordinance doesn't really speak to that either. Like how do you use a HUD inspection or county welfare inspection when they determine eligibility for TRA and Section 8? So you may want to add that in there.
It's certainly worth consideration, Corp Counsel, so
Certainly.
you will take it under advisement. Anyone else? Thank you. Mr. Clerk, before we move to the next item, permit me to recognize the presence of former Council President Donald Bradley. He has joined us in the chambers. Welcome. We're happy to have you with us. The next item, Mr. Clerk.
We will be, if I have heard the discussion correctly, deferring action on the 4 Airbnb legislation, pieces of
Yes.
legislation. Public hearings will remain open. That takes us to resolutions. Resolution 701A is a temporary appropriation to continue support to selected initiatives to increase immunization levels.
Any comments? Next item.
B is a temporary emergency appropriation to provide additional breastfeeding peer counseling funding.
I have to ask, make a funny observation. What kind of program is that? How do you teach Breastfeeding?
Someone here to respond? No? If not, I can try. So I'm guessing that this is from WIC, from the
Yes.
WIC program, and so there are people that we pay for, like lactation, I don't know if you call them lactationists or lacticians, I'm not sure, so forgive me if I'm making the wrong term, but they do come in and help women, mothers, help the baby latch on for breastfeeding. So that's what they do, that's what we're paying for, that's what the grant is for, shall I say.
Thank you
Sorry,
so
guys,
much.
I'm a recent mom, so.
Thank you so much for the explanation. Next item, Mr. Clerk.
701C is a labor agreement for the public health nurses. 1D is a labor agreement for the Newark identification officers. E is a bid contract to provide a Chevy Suburban 4-door.
Next item.
702A is a temporary, non-exclusive revocation construction access license agreement.
Any comments?
I suppose we're getting that money. No?
Yes. I see a couple of heads nodding. Is that,
It's like a rental agreement that we are getting the money. Yes, okay.
thank you. Next item, Mr. Clerk.
704A is the stipulation of settlement. These are tax appeals.
I see the tax assessor is here.
Good afternoon, Madam President, honorable council members.
Good morning. Good
morning.
afternoon.
So,
Any comments for the tax assessor?
Just state your name and title.
Aaron Wilson, tax assessor.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you, Councilman.
I do have a question. It's, let's say, how are we, I know that the value to the market is like 68%, I believe it is, the assessed value to market or something like that?
The original table that came out for the Director of Division of Taxation was 6938. I believe we challenged that and raised it to 80.42%.
To what?
To 80.42%.
So that we're not subject then to have the revaluation?
Well, we're also subject to a revaluation at the current time for 2023.
Okay, because as I said before, I saw a letter from the county office mandating that we had a revaluation. So you're saying that it's to 2023 more or less?
Yes, Councilman.
So we will start then, or we will have to conclude it by 2023?
The conclusion, the values arrived at will be in place in 2023.
Okay.
I do have a question. When I looked at my agenda, for the first time, we don't have 3 to 4 pages. So what's the explanation? It's got to be good.
Well, Madam President, sorry. Yes, I've implemented a couple of procedures that should, first of all, limit the amount of refunds, also with implementation of credits. So the flood has been slow to a trickle, and what is coming in will be less painful to the city financially. That combined with the improving market, I think the city will be in good shape.
So it will affect
Yes.
less the cash flow of the city, but the effect would be the same. We're giving them a credit and not sending a check, I suppose.
That's correct, Councilman. The difference between the two is quite massive.
Yes.
Because what the city collects for itself is just over half of the tax rate. So you're essentially collecting $2 for refunding $1.
So we're collecting the whole tax that includes the school and includes the county, and only giving them credit for the city portion.
That's correct, Councilman. And by doing credits, the burden goes across the entire rate.
Okay, good, okay.
Very good.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
Any further questions, or?
May I?
Oh, of course. I'm sorry, Councilman.
The right is also available. Blau and Blau is doing work for the city. I go back again to the discussion that we had at the last meeting with the BA about the contract or the lack of contract that we have with Blau and Blau. In the meantime, they're doing some work and reevaluating some properties. Is that true?
Well, I wouldn't characterize it as that, Councilman. They're not revaluing properties. They've just filed petitioners' complaints on certain.
How can they, for example, one case in point, a property that is on the books that is worth $7 million goes to $70 million after Blau and Blau gets involved? How is it possible?
Well, Councilman, the number on, as I understand it, the numbers on the complaint are not the numbers that will be arrived at. That is just the complaint number. So that's just what they're seeking. Obviously, in the give and take of litigation, a different number would be arrived at.
But how can this law firm do work for the city without a contract?
Too far. To the extent you want any specific discussion about a particular case, we'd have to go into executive session to discuss that, which I'm happy to do. With respect to your question regarding a contract, we do have a contract. The question is whether or not it requires a resolution. We have taken the initial position that since there is no out-of-pocket expense to the city, it doesn't require a resolution for us to retain them. I'm happy to discuss that further in executive session as well.
Madam President?
Would that be acceptable, Councilman?
Yeah. Madam President?
Yes, Councilman Ramos.
To the administrator, just as a follow-up to Councilman Amador's point, could we get a list of properties that Blau and Blau has done these, informal assessments on, or a breakdown by ward?
Pardon me, they haven't done any, I wouldn't characterize them as
Evaluation, whatever you want to call the work that they're
Sure.
doing on behalf of the city. I'm curious to see how they are coming up with which properties to target.
Sure. We can get that
process?
information to you, but again, I would want to communicate that information to you in writing and discuss it in closed session, though.
So we'll get that information from your office?
Yes, Councilman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Assessor, any other comments?
I'm sorry, Madam President, no further comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, not necessarily related to that, but I'm taking advantage of the fact that Mr. Waldrop has walked in. Are we willing to do the second reading of the special events ordinance with the changes, or we're deferring that?
We're deferring.
We deferred it.
We're deferring. We do not have the changes at this time.
And by the way, since Mr. Waldrop is here, we're still waiting for the record of all the entities that have had special events in the past, how much they owe, what they owe, and we still don't have that. It's about 3 weeks.
Melvin Waldrop, Special Events Coordination, Office of the Business Administrator. As I indicated to you during our meeting, the slate on most of the organizations were wiped clean based on what the council did last year, and I will provide you with whatever is outstanding before the end of this week.
Any other? Thank you. Next item, Mr. Clerk.
7R5A is a contract for support and maintenance of an upgrade of proprietary hardware and software.
Next item.
6A is a professional services contract to provide expert services.
Portuguese parade.
Yes. Councilman Osborne, I'm sorry.
This is in reference to the water lawsuit?
Mr. Clerk, 7 or 6A?
B, yes.
Yes.
A or B?
No,
B.
A. No.
No, B is related to the,
Lawsuit.
yeah.
How often are we going to receive updates on that, on that situation with the lawsuit? How often would the council receive updates?
I see the BA moving to the microphone. are you going to suggest that we have when we have executive session?
I think, yes, but I can answer that question in public
Sure.
session. There's ongoing communication with the law firm that's representing the city in the lawsuit, so there's essentially regular updates. If you want a more formal update, that should take place in closed session.
Madam President, if I may.
Yes, Councilman Gonzalez.
Mr. BA, that contract, I was reading it, and it says that it runs from August 2018 to July 2018, so it goes backwards instead of going forward. Somebody made a mistake with the date.
Are you talking about the date that's in the contract?
The date in the contract says that it goes from August 2018 to July 2018.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that is the case. We can certainly find out
So
why.
I suppose it's July 2019.
I presume that's the case. I don't
Yes.
have it in front
So
of me.
somebody, again, I believe that, so we're not as careful as we should be when we are revising or drafting these contracts, or any piece of legislation for that matter. I believe that we have too many typos in these documents, and these are documents that are going to last forever in the records of the city of Newark. We should be more careful.
Yes, Councilman. I'm not sure it's a typo, but I'll certainly look into it. It may be.
It couldn't go back from August to July.
If, now, there are certain times, particularly since this is a ratifying resolution, that it may well be that work was performed during that period of time and the contract had not been.
It would be for more than a month.
No, but this is,
600,000.
fine. I'll take a look at that and make sure, but
3 years to improve reading in a law firm. You know how it works.
absolutely, no question about it. Yes, I got most of my legal acumen I got from looking at your paper in law school, so yes, I agree.
So please let the councilman who has an accounting degree add it to his credits. Mr. Clerk.
6B is a resolution for a professional services contract, the First Amendment to the agreement to provide legal services concerning special defense counsel.
Madam President, can I ask
Yes,
a question on
Councilman
that?
Osborne.
I see originally the contract was for 100,000, now it's for 500,000. Why the increase?
Yes.
Yes, Councilman Eric Pennington, Business Administrator. I'm sorry, what is the question again?
Why, the contract was originally for 100,000, now it's for 500,000. Why?
It was, yes, it's for $600,000, and it's an additional $500,000. The complexity and intensity of the litigation was significantly more than was anticipated and represented to us in the beginning. As we reported to the council, again, generally, it's a significant litigation, and it will require this amount to defend the city appropriately.
Thank you. Next item, Mr. Clerk.
We will discuss 7R6C with Corporation Counsel in executive session. 8A is an exception to public bidding to provide for the website hosting support, upgrades, management services, maintenance of archives, records management systems.
Next item, Mr.
8B is an appointment to the Board of Adjustment.
Where's Mr. Arias?
Is Mr. Arias here?
We never interview our Board of Adjustment people.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Oh,
No,
Say that again?
not the council's Board of Adjustment.
Oh, well, that's too bad, because I was going to say some good things about him.
Oh, you can still say that.
Next item, Mr. Clerk.
8C is also an appointment to the Board of Adjustment.
Yeah, I'll second that one.
Yeah.
Who has a 92% attendance rate, by the way, at this.
Yes.
Can we go back to 7R8B? I like to
8B.
co-sponsor that. I see Councilman Quintana sponsoring. But I
Well,
would like to
Eddie,
second.
Councilman Osborne, Councilwoman Crump, we also seconded.
Oh, okay. Just was saying, you know.
Love Juan.
For a person.
We all wanted to
Sorry.
collective.
I was wanting to claim my resident.
We should let you have it.
Great pick, great pick.
Okay. Well, he's wonderful, so. I'm sorry, Mr. Clerk. Let me get back to business.
8B are various expressions of profound sorrow and regret. 8E are various recognizing and commending resolutions. 7R9A is a ratifying, authorizing resolution for an exception to public bidding to provide support, maintenance of proprietary software and hardware. 7R12A is a bid contract to provide crane maintenance and repair to the city facilities.
Next item.
12B is a professional services contract to provide investigation, design, construction, administration services for infrastructure improvements to the project of the Cedar Grove Reservoir. 12C is a resolution for the Department of Water Sewer for final quantities to close out order number 1. This is an amendment to the resolution adopted on February 1st, 2017.
Next item.
If I may, I just,
On this one, the change order?
yeah, the change order is that,
Mr.
see,
Clerk.
all the change orders that I see for adjustment of quantities or whatever, in most cases, it's increasing it. I haven't seen that many that decrease the amount of the contract. And it's surprising that we underestimate the amount of the contract in almost 100% of the cases.
As I read, it said the change
No,
order will
we are
only
paying $13,000 more. In some cases,
$13,000.
in some cases, $140,000, $150,000 more. So why is it that we always have to pay more and we don't get an adjustment reducing the amount of the contract in some cases?
Actually, I thought it was a plus for the first time. This is a minimal amount.
Yes, well, it's a minimum amount, but no,
Yes.
my concern is that all the adjustments tend to be up and not one that is coming down in the contract amount. That's my concern.
Okay, Mr. Clerk.
Before we go on, Councilman, I'd like to go back to your question about the dates. Yes, it is a typo. The second date should be 2019.
Okay.
You're kidding.
Where is this now?
You're kidding.
Which one?
That's it.
That was,
The contract increasing the amount by 500,000.
August.
it opens
Yeah, August,
stating that
yeah,
the
it was
dates are
backwards.
2018 to 2019.
Yeah.
Further down in the body, they make the mistake of 2018 instead of 19.
Thank you, Councilman.
Madam President, can I
Yes, Councilman Osborne.
go back to 7R6A and the contract with Gradient?
7 or who?
7R6A. I'm looking at the contract, and I think we should update to show who the current director is, because presently it still has Director Andrea Adebawi.
Again, that's even more significant, and we're not doing what we should do. We should get someone that is a professional proofreader and submit all those documents through that person to do the proofreading. It reflects back on the city of Newark that all these documents have mistakes. For an extra salary, I will do it.
On communications, 8A is a reappointment to the Commission of the Newark Parking Authority, as a commission for the Newark Parking Authority.
I'd like to sponsor that.
Second.
10A are various raffle and bingo license. We have a couple of items attempting to reach you as added starters. The first is the Sixth Amendment to the Newark Living Downtown Plan to include an HIV/AIDS counseling and residence use to allow, to permit this in the zone. The next is a document dealing with the police firing range, an agreement with the property owner. Then we have a bid contract that is attempting to get to for paving of various streets. There is a...
Mr. Clerk, I thought you said a couple,
Well, several.
didn't you?
Several. There are only two more. The next is an ordinance which would go back to the ban the box. This is coming back to the council.
It's coming back?
Yes. There is also coming as an added starter an appeal to the council for a rent control decision. Your attorney, Mr. Herman, will speak to that in executive session. That concludes.
Can we get
Got a
more,
list of the streets to be paved? It is,
We can pull the contract. We can pull the contract for you, but I am told that there are 3 in each ward.
yeah, could we get those streets like today? And then also too, could we get more information on Ban the Box? Like, what's that? I know it's coming back, but I've never seen it. So what is, can somebody elaborate?
Ban the box is legislation that would require that an employer not ask the question about a person's criminal background before they do the interview.
Who's submitting that, administration or a council?
This is being submitted this time by the administration. Its previous process was from then Westward Councilman Ronald Rice.
Ronald Rice, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Madam President, if I may,
Yes, of course.
just have a comment. Let's say, I see a perceived lack of diversity in the employment of the city, especially at the highest levels of employment in the city. And I would like the administration to come to us and explain to us, let's say, why is that happening. I believe that it's not representative of the population of the city, and it's something that I would like to get some explanation to. Directors, there is no one Hispanic director. There is no, let's say at the second level of administration, I don't see that much diversity either. So I just want to have an explanation as to why that's happening, and perhaps a detail of that explains, let's say, the different ethnicities of all the individuals that are employed in those positions.
We will do an invite for a future special conference.
Yeah, I would like to talk to or have the director of the personnel come and explain to us, to say why that is.
Yes.
Because it's something that I perceive. It might be something that I am wrong about, but it's something that I perceive.
Yeah, Madam President.
So, yes, Councilman Ramos.
I also want to mention, like, some of the city's boards and commissions, you know, the planning board being one. I attended the hearing last Monday on behalf of a number of residents in my ward who were objecting to a proposed construction. And I know Councilman Amador's raised this in the past. We don't have one representative from the North Ward on the Central Planning Board. So, you know, I want to extend his motion to some of the city's parking authorities and other board again. So, you know, we need to look at this beyond just employment.
So, Mr. Corp Counsel, can we fold this into the conversation during executive session?
Yes, we can discuss it, Eric Pennings, we can discuss it in executive session, but in order to give Councilman Gonzalez and the rest of the council members a more comprehensive response, it will probably require a separate meeting with a more appropriate discussion.
Just one more thing before we go into executive session. Can someone provide an update on the various water and sewer projects that are going to take place in the city, especially the South Street flooding situation that has been promised for quite some time? There's someone who's a representative of the water department?
Yes.
Good afternoon, council members. John George, Chief Engineer for Water and Sewer Utility. We have addressed the project called South Street and Adams Street Drainage Improvement Project, and it's been submitted to the state with a loan application, and the state has considered the project and it has ranked it very high based on the scoring it has received. And it's a total of $6 million that we are asking the state to loan us. And the application is going through the process of reviews, and there's a bond ordinance that was submitted by the finance department for the council to act on. I think it's going to be before your approval, before the council next meeting, I believe. And there's also an application to the local finance board to approve the application. Both those items are scheduled to be on the council agenda as soon as it's approved and scheduled. So we have undertaken preliminary design of the project, and the project is ready to go forward as soon as we receive the approval from the state.
Good. Would it be possible, and probably you have done that already, since South Street is being used as an access road to the airport, and it's used mostly by people from out of town, and it's basically a convenience, and when it's flooded, there's no way you can go through. Would it be possible for the state to consider that and speed up the process of giving us an answer?
Yes, we'll certainly bring that up to the state.
Because it's not a local street, it's a street that kind of connects the airport with the rest of the world.
We will do that, yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just want to, if I can just add, regarding the cleaning of the catch basins, do you guys have a waiting list for that or something? Is there a waiting list?
Well, I mean, we have resources to go out and send trucks out to clean catch basins as we receive the complaints, or from our own, checking on the properties and streets. Based on, the number of calls or locations that we have received in the order of receipt of those complaints, that's how we clean out the catch basin. So, if there is a specific location that you have a concern about, we can certainly look into that.
Well, we have a list. So what I'm asking is, are you currently on backlog of cleaning them? Because there seems to be a long process in them getting clean. Usually when we go out, residents complain about how they have called the department and asked for it to be clean, and they're in flooded areas. Is there a waiting list that we should be aware of, as the council and the administration, so that we can direct people appropriately? Because obviously it's not happening once someone calls and they go immediately out. There seems to be a waiting period for it.
We do handle that through a list of calls that we receive, but I have to get some information about it in order to answer.
No problem. Thank you.
Why, to follow up on Councilwoman McIver's point, why wait for a complaint when we should have a process in place where because right now, if we don't get a complaint about a specific location, we're not going to forward to you. However, we may have a problem there because the residents may not complain. Why not have a process in place where you are going to look at potentially every one of them throughout the city? Why wait for a complaint from us? I drove through on the last rainfall Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I couldn't believe what I saw.
Pardon me.
Because of the fact, and the people didn't complain. So they're not going to complain after what I saw. So if they don't complain, they don't get the catch basin clean.
If I may answer,
Why not be proactive instead of reactive? That's all I'm saying.
we'll take that into consideration. I just want to also advise the council that we have over 10,000 catch basins across the city. So we have to follow certain methodology to address locations which needs maintenance to avoid flooding in the streets. So we will certainly take that into consideration.
Council President, if I could request through your chair, if possible, when the gentleman goes back to his department, if we could get a listing of the catch basins that are on the queue to be cleaned, and what has already been cleaned, you know, a list of catch basins that you've already cleaned within this year, just so we can know if the ones that we get complaints about are on the list to be cleaned.
Yes, we'll provide that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. B.A.?
Yes, Council President, with respect to, I guess, Councilman Gonzalez's earlier comment about the lack of diversity, I did want to go back to that, if I could, and just talk generally without getting into any too specific personnel issues. As I'm sure Councilman Gonzalez and the rest of the council is aware, Mayor Baraka has one of the most inclusive ideals toward having a diverse administration that the city has ever had. Indeed, since I've been here, every opportunity that comes up, we have a fairly extensive search for the top-level people to make sure that the people who fill those roles are, first, competent and qualified, and second, are reflective of the people in the administration. We are prepared to take recommendations from the council and look at them and have them evaluated along with anyone else. The mayor is committed to making sure that there's a diverse administration here and has demonstrated that throughout his tenure. So I don't know if the suggestion was that there is some intentional position taking to exclude anybody, but that's not the case. We want to have the best qualified people and make sure that they are reflective of the diversity of this community.
Intentional or not, the perception is there. Let's say you have to only look at the people in the positions. You look at the people in the positions, and there's one director that happens to be non-African Americans, and all the others happen to be African Americans. So the perception at that level is something that you don't have to have 20/20 to see it. But at other levels, it might be different, and perhaps that's the explanation that I want. And I understand that the mayor has the best intentions of hiring the most qualified individuals. I do not question that, but there might be some, let's say, individuals that are capable of doing the jobs that are not African American, and that's what I would like to see, that at least some candidates have been interviewed for those positions.
We're in the process now of interviewing for the for the deputy mayor and director of economic and housing development. We have a fairly extensive process. It is public. To the extent there is any candidate that any council member or any citizen feels is appropriate for the position, they can certainly submit that application. This administration always looks with an eye toward ensuring that we have competent, qualified, diverse people filling these roles. So, Councilman, I don't know if Councilman McCallum had a question. I'm sorry. Did you have a question, Councilman? No, sir. Yeah. So we are always looking to make sure that we have a diverse, competent field of people who represent the city at the highest levels.
Mr. Clerk, to the BA and to the question, I have been approached several times. Actually, someone spoke to my son over the weekend, and he mentioned it to me. And so we had a discussion, and that the observation I find is not really fully correct. I have to say that, Councilman. I come from a father who taught us that leadership should be the very best. And in a town where the complexion is what it is, only the most talented are selected for the position to meet the mayor's level of excellence. I have to say, because I've been in his presence, the last thing that he could ever be accused of or suggested, that's the wrong word, that someone may suggest is that there is a prejudicial preference for African Americans in his administration. He is probably one of the most, and I've served under 3 mayors, he is probably one of the most liberal when it comes to bringing to the leadership of this city. It's not what you look like, it's what you can produce. And so I'm going to lean into that. We're going to have a conversation, you and I.
Council President, I just want to add, if I can, I think it's premature and it's irresponsible for us to look at this in a sense of city directors, number one. I think that you can't sit up here and have a conversation just about the complexion of our city directors. If we want to have a conversation about diversity hiring in general, we can do that, but to just pick a select group and point out just directors, that's immature and it's irresponsible. Then you start to get backlash against different groups in the city, like the police department and the fire department, and then people can start to throw complaints that way. So I think that we need to look at it in general regarding our diversity hiring, but not just to pick a select group. I do want to piggyback off what Council President say in regards to our mayor in this administration, who is selective of giving opportunities to Black and brown people in our city. I've never worked or been with someone who is so excited about doing that and making opportunities available. So we have to be careful with our words sometimes of how we put things out there, because it can be perceived in a very negative tone. And the last thing we want to do is to implement something or make people believe that, especially in the way that we're going in our city moving forward. We definitely don't want to take a step backwards, but I think we should look at the city's employment on the whole rather than just picking out a select group of employees, because then you have a whole lot of different complaints that might come in for different groups. So I just want to point that out. That's just my comment as a council person, but more so as an HR professional as well. Thank you.
Madam President, if I may.
Yes, certainly.
Something, having, let's say, being an attorney, we are people that are very concerned about words. They say words is our trade as an attorney. And I said, there is a perception. I didn't say that that's reality. I say I have the perception based on certain group of individuals that I see. I know for a fact that when Mr. Booker was the mayor here, someone came and said, "This looks like Old San Juan." And it was the father of the mayor came here and said, "See, this looks like Old San Juan," because at that time there was much more Latinos employed on the second floor that has ever been. So my comment is coming from an educated place. It's not something that I am going to make lightly. It's not something that I believe I should be called disrespectful. I believe that everyone has the opportunity and the right to express his views, and I will continue to express mine as long as I am in this council.
Absolutely.
I recommend that we bring back Anthony Campos as an Italian-American police chief.
Madam President,
As soon as,
yeah, Madam President,
yes, Councilman Ramos.
I just want to state that, you know, I missed part of the comments because I was talking to Councilman James in the little hallway, but I don't want Councilman Gonzalez's comments to be taken as a shot at the mayor. I think his expression, and I've been here long enough when the issue of diversity's come up, you know, from different angles, and sometimes the conversation is not necessarily a comfortable one. And I do, you know, tell you that I have, for the most part, you know, a lot of admiration, respect for the directors that the mayor has assembled. I think they're very qualified and capable individuals who, you know, I work with on a daily basis. You know, it's good to see that some of them are members of the administration who've been here a while and now actually have an opportunity to lead, because that should be our model and example. But I also believe that as a point of reference, you know, part of what Councilman is bringing to the BA's attention is that if there are opportunities in the future, you know, we do have qualified Latinos across the city, across the state, who can serve in leadership positions. And hopefully, you know, going through the process like you just went through to recruit a director of development, you know, it's going to help you attract more candidates for some of these positions as they become available. And, you know, that's your job. You know, as a BA, you have to establish a workforce that's capable of doing, you know, what the residents expect our workforce to do, what we pay taxes for. But at the same time, you know, keeping in mind that having a diverse workforce is something that strengthens the city. You know, we have people that come here that English is not their first language. You know, they have to pay their water bill, they got to pay their taxes, they got to go to court. And we have to have people in place that can serve residents regardless of race or ethnicity. So.
You know, if I may, thank you, Councilman Ramos. And Council President Crump, if I could follow up a little bit on Councilwoman McIver's comment about looking at overall diversity and not just at the director level. If, for example, we look at the last two appointments to the municipal bench here in Newark, they were both Latina. We also have, hopefully, the council members themselves have engaged the mayor. I have no doubt that the mayor has sufficient relationships with the council where if there is an individual or a position or something else that they wanted to bring to his attention, he would listen and work on that. And to that point, if we look at currently, the superintendent of schools is a Latino, the executive director of the Newark Housing Authority is a Latino. Those individuals work closely with the mayor and this administration. They have the mayor's support. They individually and collectively support the administration. We work together. We don't agree on things lockstep, but we have a working relationship and a level of respect that we think is healthy and is good. And beyond the employment area, there is an aggressive initiative on the part of the administration that the mayor has directed us to undertake and has been vigorously pursued by my office and others to make sure that the vendors that we employ, all of the vendors, have a diversity component. We want to encourage hiring Newarkers. We have worked diligently to ensure that the vendors that we have are representative of the racial diversity of the city. There's a initiative afoot right now to change our ordinance, it hasn't reached you yet, to make sure that there is indeed a diversity component. And diversity doesn't mean just black and brown and white. Diversity also includes women, sexual orientation, Vietnam era status, age. All of these are components of things that we look for. We want to make sure are reflective of what the city is. The mayor has been a staunch supporter of making sure that the dollars that the residents put into the city's coffers get spent with people who look like us. That includes employment as well as on the vendor base and contractors. Indeed, There is a contractor down the street right now who is building the parking deck, and they have an affirmative action requirement. Just last week, I wouldn't ordinarily just share this, but last week I sent a directive to the Housing Authority to make sure that those contractors comply, I'm sorry, the Parking Authority, not the Housing Authority, that the Parking Authority complies with their affirmative action requirements, because some of the forms that were required had not been filled out, and we had discussions with them to let them know. From the mayor directed me to let them know that if they failed to have the affirmative action requirements met, that we would shut that job down. It is essentially our job. But even though it's our job, we are policing ourselves first, and they have been directed that if they don't provide that information, the job will be shut down. I'm happy to report that the next day, we got responses from them that were positive. We don't have all the information that we want, but we will stay on top of that. We will get the information that we need. But that is, that's the mayor's position, that's his directive, and it is reflective of his attitude toward all of the diverse areas of the city and what he has done and what he's directed us to follow up on.
One final comment, if I may. I think the greatest example of the mayor's commitment to diversity is the 9 of us. When we were selected, we were not selected because of the degrees we have or because of the influence that we may have, but because we reflect the complexion of the great city of Newark. Every major population is represented here, and if there was, only one person has ever said something to me. It was a person who was the color of my skin, but came from another country. And he asked, when are we going to have some Africans as on the ticket? But I think we're the greatest example of what Mayor Raz Baraka is committed to. And I'm sorry that, there are those of us, and everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I think actions do speak louder than words. I love everyone up here, and I'd like to think that there's reciprocity in our council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam President, can I have
Councilman Osborne.
As far as diversity on construction projects, I know that the mayor mentioned to me personally that they had a problem down at the parking garage, but it's also stated that the contractor that's doing the lead replacement lines are also having problems getting some minority workers, and I think that's referred to the union hall. I know for sure that the operating engineers and some of the iron workers that are working on these projects, it's not that many, I haven't seen any blacks, honestly, or Hispanics.
We can certainly follow up on that. It has been my experience that there are minority subcontractors who are on these jobs now. I have seen some personally, but I'm certainly willing to look into it further and make sure that they're in compliance with what you're saying.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk.
Madam President, on a happy note, I'd like to congratulate the director of DPW for doing a terrific job this weekend in the East Ward with the cleanup. It was absolutely fabulous. They hit all the streets, all the corners that where we had illegal dumping. They cleaned up everything. Just one thing, to remove the illegal banners, if he could, on Stockton, South, and Delancey Street. Other than that, it was a terrific job, and my sincere congratulations on behalf of the community.
Congratulations. Pennsylvania Avenue.
Madam President.
Councilman, Pennsylvania Avenue.
I don't think they hit that.
I just wanted to put that out because I come that way to work every day. Councilman.
Yeah, I too want to send a notice through the BA thanking Director Thomas, Director Ambrose, and Michelle Gonzalez from PSE&G woke up Sunday morning around 5 o'clock to what sounded like an explosion outside, and a tree fell across Lake Street. We had a power outage early Sunday morning, and you know, it was good to see that the city and PSE&G responded quickly. About 27 homes that were affected, including mine, and they were able to get the power up within a reasonable amount of time, about 11 o'clock in the morning. So, you know, it was very windy out, and
Wow.
definitely good to see the city and PSE&G respond under some tough weather conditions. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, would you forward these words of commendation to the Director, Thomas,
Yes.
And also to Michelle Gonzalez from PSE&G.
and to whomever else needs to be included?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
This brings us to the public speaking portion before we go into executive session. This is a 30-minute period in which speakers will be given 3 minutes to speak. When you step to the microphone, please state your name and address for the record, and you will see a small timing device on the podium in front of you, which will begin counting down your time when you begin speaking. When you reach the 2-minute mark, the yellow light will illuminate, indicating that you have 1 minute remaining for summation. And when you reach your 3rd minute, the red light will illuminate, indicating that your time has expired. Please look forward, speak into the microphone. We are recording these proceedings, and if you turn away from the microphone, we may miss part of your statement. Please address questions to the chair and not to individual council members. Is there anyone present that wishes to speak at this time?
Anyone appearing? No one appearing, Mr. Clerk.
No one appearing. Motion, council to hold to go into executive session.
Roll call.
Yes.
Gonzalez.
Yes.
Yes. McCallum.
Yes.
McIver.
Yes.
Osborne. Absent. Quintana.
Yes.
Ramos.
Yes.
Yes.
Listen.